Good afternoon. I hope everybody had a great 4th of July. Jimmy here in Chicago. I think holidays like this, they should let out some of the outfit guys. Let them come home for the weekend and spend a few days with their family and friends. Got a great story for you guys today. We're going to talk about the legacy of James and Adino. Before that, I want to share with you my backdrop photo. This is an actual photo of the inside of a courtroom at the Dirksen Federal Building. That's the Federal Court Building downtown Chicago on Jackson and Dearborn. You can easily take the bus or the Blue Line train there. It drops you off right in front. These trials are open to the public. Anybody can go. And the vast majority of my stories are all about all the mob trials I went to, going back to the early 1990s through the mid-2000s. I was very fortunate to attend some of the biggest federal trials in Chicago. Now, you can see right under the government plaque there, that's where the federal judge sits. He or she controls the entire courtroom. Next to the judge usually is the court reporter. And then on the other side is usually a federal marshal. On the left there is where the jury sits. That table there is usually for the prosecution team and all their lawyers and FBI agents. The next table, this is where men like Joe Lombardo, Frank Calabrese, Jimmy Marcello, Sam Carlisi, Anthony the Hatch. This is where the defendants sit along with their team of lawyers. Scattered in the courtroom, depending on how high security the trial is, you'll see a lot of federal marshals and FBI agents. You could spot them a mile away. Now, in the gallows, this is where some of the defendants' family and friends sit. That's when you know the trial is serious. When you see the victim or the defendant's family, this is where some of the reporters are. This is where the courtroom artist is. That's usually who I like to sit next to. Sometimes you'll see other attorneys, federal marshals, federal agents, retired agents, maybe a few law students. But I show this just to show you how close proximity you could be to some of the defendants. So imagine being only 15 feet away from a guy like Tough Tony Calabrese, or seeing Nick Calabrese, or Jimmy Marcello chowing down on Fritos and M&Ms, or seeing Joey Lombardo crack jokes. I mean, you're literally that close to him. There's nothing quite like it. So I highly recommend, if there's any trials coming up in your city or your town, wherever you guys live, to check it out. There's nothing like it, and you learn a lot, believe me. But let's get into it. Let's talk about Jimmy I. Jimmy I was born December 14th. He's got the same birthday as me, Sagittarius, 1942. Made member of the Chicago outfit. This man here definitely did some heavy work. He was a suspect in at least a dozen outfit murders, but never once was convicted of any violent crimes. Jimmy I was a fierce loan shark, debt collector, juice man, burglar, but his specialty was hijacking. He did 18 years in prison. One was for a racketeering pinch. The other was for burglary. When he was finally sprung from his last stint in prison, he moved out to the quiet suburb of Darien, which is a western suburb of Chicago. Eventually became boss of the Cicero crew. And the government claims he was the underboss of the Chicago outfit up until the day he died. Jimmy Ice Pick, as they called him, Jimmy from the Currency. He actually survived the vicious chop shop wars as well. Now, Jimmy I was part of the notorious Wild Bunch crew on Taylor Street. Leader of that crew, you got Harry Allen the Hook, This guy's one of the biggest hitmen in the history of the Chicago outfit. Years ago, he killed a union official, a guy named Bill Logan. But through his connections through the First Ward, they bribed the judge and fixed the trial. Corrupt Judge Frank Wilson found Harry Allman not guilty of killing Bill Logan. But years ago, when the government's informant, that lowlife Bob Cooley, he decided to cooperate and wear a wire, and he admitted to being the bagman that gave the judge a $10,000 bribe. I went to the second trial where they threw out the double jeopardy law. It's the first time in the history that they ever did that. I seen Bob Cooley, the corrupt lawyer, cokehead, degenerate gambler, testify against Harry Allman. And unfortunately for Harry Allman and his family, the jury believed that Harry Allman killed Bill Logan. His good friend, another member of the Wild Bunch crew, Louis Almeida, testified against him. There was also another witness that testified against him. But unfortunately for Harry Allman, he ended up dying in prison. Nephew of Joe Ferriola. Ferriola gave him $250,000 when Harry got out of jail to get on his feet. But this guy's a legend in the Taylor Street crew. Next to him, you got Gerald Scarpelli, prime suspect in several outfit murders. But two that come into mind is when they killed the Daubers. This is where the 26th Street crew and the Wild Bunch crew worked together on a hit. Billy Dauber and his wife Charlotte Dauber were coming out of a courthouse in Joliet. Frankie Calabrese and Ronnie Jarrett tailed them, ran them off the road. Butch Petroselli and Scarpelli got out of a van and shotgun blasted both the Daubers to death. Billy Dauber and his wife Charlotte Dauber, killing both of them. Fast forward, Scarpelli was locked up in the MCC jail downtown, and right before he was going to talk to the grand jury, or right before his trial, he committed suicide. They looked into it a little further. They suspected foul play. He had a plastic bag wrapped over his head, and his hands were zip tied behind his back. And at the same time, on the same floor, Hitler, Frankie the Schweiss, Frank the German, was at the MCC on the same floor at the same time that Scarpelli supposedly committed suicide. We all know how corrupt the MCC is, so it's more likely than not that Frankie the German killed Scarpelli right there in the MCC. Now, next to him, man of the hour, you got Jimmy Ice Pick. You can just imagine why they gave him the nickname Ice Pick. Fierce enforcer, made member of the Chicago outfit. He made a ton of money in the rackets, and like DeFranco, made more money legitimately. This guy is the prime suspect in several Chicago outfit murders, but never once was charged with any violent crimes. Fortunately for Jimmy, he never got killed by the outfit. Aside from the 18 years he did, he was pretty much a free man, lived to be 80 years old. Now, not so lucky, on the very bottom, you got little Tony Borsellino. Very popular, well-liked, well-respected guy in the Chicago outfit. He was one of the men that brutally tortured and murdered the guys that burglarized and broke into Tony Accardo's house. Shortly after all the burglars were taken care of, Tony Borsellino was killed himself. Frank Calabrese pleaded with Angelo the Bull to give little Tony a pass. Angelo the Bull, boss of the 26th Street crew, asked Frank Calabrese if he wanted to go in his place. Nicky Calabrese testified in court, I'll never forget it, that the day Tony Calabrese was killed, out of nowhere, the sky turned pitch black, and there was a real bad storm brewing over Chicago. Frankie and Nick thought that was kind of weird, kind of eerie feeling. Next to him, you got Butch Petroselli, very close friend of Harry Allman. They suspect that when Harry Allman was locked up, Butchie was skimming some of the money. Butchie also was hated by some of the mob guys. Frank Calabrese hated Butch Petrocelli, and Butch Petrocelli would go down to Rush Street with a bunch of his guys. Tony Borsellino would find out and then go down the next night with a bigger group of guys. So they were constantly trying to outdo each other. They were down there partying, gambling, fighting, bringing a lot of media, bringing down a lot of heat, and the outfit bosses were getting pissed off. Chicago outfit's different, unlike New York, Philly. They like to keep things quiet. Bosses had enough of these guys and eventually had them both killed. Butchie was lured to Angel the Bull's club in Bridgeport. He told Nick Calabrese, go take out the garbage. When they walked into the room next door, Butchie was jumped by Frank Calabrese, Ronnie Jarrett, a couple of the 26th Street guys. They really gave him the business. They brutally strangled and killed Butchie. Next to him, you got Scalise, master thief, career criminal. This guy hated Angel the Bull. He said that nobody liked being near Angel at the club, but you had to respect him because he was the boss. He was very dangerous. Years ago, him, Arthur, the genius, and another guy pulled off one of the largest diamond heists ever. They stole the famous marble diamond in London. They sent that diamond back to Chicago bosses. Till this day, that diamond has never been recovered, but these guys got pinched. They did not rat. They did not cooperate. They did their time like men. Fast forward, I went to their trial. They were charged with, they were planning on robbing several armed cars, several suburban banks. They had a hit list of guys they were going to go after. They were also going to rob Angel the Bull's fortress in Bridgeport. The FBI had them under drone surveillance. They would use night vision goggles when they were trailing them. These guys got pulled over casing Angelo Petria's house. They had all kinds of burglary tools in the car. They even showed where somebody drilled holes through the cinder blocks at Angelo Bull's house, doing like a test run. These guys were all convicted, did a few more years in prison, but I believe now Scalise is out and retired. Hopefully he's behaved himself. Hopefully he's learned his lesson. But knowing Scalise, I'm pretty sure he's up to his old tricks again, and he's probably planning to score right now as we think. But this is just some of the lethal members, the heavy hitters from the Wild Bunch. There were others, but most of these guys ended up dead, like Tony Borsellino, Butch Petrocelli, Scarpelli. Some of them died in prison, like Harry. And some of them were very lucky to dodge any indictments, not get killed, and live to be old men, guys like Jimmy I. Now you can see how handsome Jimmy from the Currency is, Jimmy Ice Pick, whatever you want to call him. This guy made a lot of money in the rackets, but most of them were hijacking. That was his specialty, right? Stealing cargo from trucks, not only the city of Chicago, but the suburbs and the surrounding cities, the entire Midwest. He also personally scammed $75,000 from an official in Cicero. Him, mob boss in Cicero, Mike Spano, his son Junior, Betty Lauren Maltese, the police chief Shulo, his nephew, and others all scammed millions of dollars in the town of Cicero. I went to Spano, Senior and Junior, and Betty Lauren Maltese trial. Check out the story I did on that. He got 6.5 years in prison. Mitch Mars, in sentencing, called him a career criminal. The judge told him it's time for him to retire from his life of crime. Everybody in the courtroom started laughing, except for the prosecutor. But Mitch Mars put away all the Chicago outfit guys, Rocky and Felice's crew, Sam Carlisi's crew, Family Secrets, Mike Spano, Jimmy I. He's public enemy number one. Unfortunately for Mitch Mars, right after Family Secrets trial, he died of lung cancer, a guy that never smoked in his life. But this is Jimmy I, like DeFranzo, really didn't need the money he was making from the rackets because he made so much money legitimately. Now here's Alan Ackerman. This was Jimmy I's attorney, one of the biggest mob attorneys back in the day. He represented not only Jimmy Ice Pick, but he represented Mikey Switek, several high-ranking motorcycle gang members, couple cartels, couple street gang shot callers, top criminal defense attorney. He even represented Boston Chicago outfit Joey Doves Iupa. He wrote a letter to the judge when Iupa was convicted saying that Iupa was not Boston Chicago outfit, that you cannot rely on the government's star witnesses, and that Joey Iupa was a family man. He also wrote a letter that was read at the Splatro wake funeral services saying what good men Tony and Michael Splatro were. But if you ever get in trouble, this is one of the biggest, most expensive, high-profile mob attorneys in Chicago, Alan Ackerman. Here's Sally D being led from the MCC to court. As we all know, he was pinched during the Good Ship Lollipop trial, all based on government star witness, that lowlife drug addict, pedophile, blowjob BJ Jehoda. Jehoda had some tax issues. Rather than do a couple years in prison, he owed No-Nos DeFranzo, Marco D'Amico, and others over $400,000. He was very jealous of Sally D's legitimate businesses, jealous of Sally D's power. So he deliberately had a personal vendetta against Sally D. And it was BJ Jehoda's testimony and him wearing a wire that convicted the entire crew. If I'm on that jury, I would have found all those guys not guilty because I could not believe a lying rat like BJ Jehoda. But during the Sally D in particular, he was represented by high-profile New York attorney Bruce Cutler, the same lawyer that represented John Gotti. But in Chicago at the Dirksen Federal Building, where they very seldom lose a case, Bruce Cutler's antics and shenanigans and bullshit, it didn't go so well in Chicago. It fell on deaf ears. The jurors found all the defendants guilty. And I'm sure Sally D was very disappointed in the weak defense and all the hundreds of thousands of dollars that that overpriced defense attorney charged him. I've seen Sally D Laurentiis twice. Once was in the early 1990s during the Good Ship Lollipop trial. And then years later, just recently, I seen him at the Taylor Street Fest, sitting outside Rosebud, having a nice dinner with his family and friends, and he even stuck around to smoke a cigar. But the government alleges that Sally D is the boss of Chicago outfit and Jimmy I was the underboss up until Jimmy I's death. But I call that total bullshit. Sally D, his outfit days are long gone behind him. He's now retired, enjoying his golden years with his family. God bless the De Laurentiis family. God bless Jimmy I. And at Jimmy I's funeral, Sally D wrote a nice Dear John letter thanking him for looking after his family when Sally was away. And Sally went on to say he was going to plant three trees in memory of Jimmy I. Now, like Johnny Bananas, like No-Nos DeFranzo, and a lot of other Chicago outfit guys, they made a lot of money legitimately. Jimmy I, being in the trucking business, had a lot of sweetheart contracts with the city of Chicago. Mayor Daley, his friends, and some of the Chicago outfit guys made millions of dollars providing trucking services for the city of Chicago. And I remember my late friend, Rocky LaMattia, who I met at Cozo's Pool Hall. I sat next to him at the Family Secrets trial until he got kicked out for trying to smuggle Frankie Calabrese Italian salami. But Rocky used to complain to me, "Oh, Jimmy, they're taking away all my trucks." He had 3 trucks in his wife's name called Galaxy or Lexi Trucking, and they eventually took that away from Rocky. But nothing good lasts forever. But the Chicago outfit made a ton of money in the trucking industry as well as Jimmy I. Now, right there in Cicero, another legitimate business, Jimmy I had was JMS Trucking. This is where he would spend time at his office right there in Cicero. Occasionally, I'll drive by there on my way to Scatchels or when I'm in Cicero, and I go by the yard, and I always used to hope to see him. Not that I would ever go up to a guy like Jimmy I, but it would be interesting to see him at his legitimate job. But Jimmy I also scammed and stole cargo, hijacking, and from other trucking companies, mostly his competitors. Another legitimate business for Jimmy I was he invested in currency exchanges. He had a currency exchange in Cicero, another place where he used to like to hang out. I've never been inside. I've never done any business at the currency, but I'm curious where some of his other currency exchanges are. If you guys know, please enter into your comments. And what a great place to launder money than a legitimate currency exchange. Now we're going to talk about some of the friends Jimmy I had. As I say in my intro, Jimmy I had a lot of friends. He was very well respected, liked, and feared by a lot of Chicago outfit guys and associates. And a good friend of his is this guy here, James Jimmy Turk Turillo. Now, I bring him up because my dad served in the Marine Corps with Jimmy Turk Turillo. And my dad said there was a lot of tough kids from all over the country, and that Jimmy Turk was by far the toughest Marine. Years later, after the Korean War, my dad was getting off work from the railroad, was at a bar in Melrose Park. Who walks in? Jimmy Turk Turillo with an entourage. He bought my dad and his friend some drinks. They made some small talk, saying how great it was to catch up and see each other. Fast forward a couple weeks later, my dad's at home at the kitchen table, and he reads in the Chicago Sun-Times, upcoming mob boss, James Jimmy Turk Turillo. My dad almost hit the floor. He had no idea that his Marine Corps buddy was an upcoming mob boss in Chicago. Unfortunately, he died way too young. I think he died late 40s, early 50s. He had some serious health issues. But the Chicago outfit took a big loss when they lost a potential leader like this man. This guy was very good friends with Lefty Rosenthal and many others. But this is what got my interest in the Chicago mob. When my dad told me he had a good friend in the Marine Corps that he found out years later was an upcoming boss, that was it for me. I started buying some of the mob books. I started out with Man Against the Mob by FBI agent Bill Romer. That really piqued my interest. Fast forward, early 1990s, I went to my very first mob trial, Gus Alex. I seen Lenny Patrick testify against Gus Alex, and from that point on, I was hooked. But this man here, the late James Turk Turillo, he would have been a major boss, the number one boss in Chicago if he didn't die. Good friend of my dad. And I bring him up because he was good friends with Jimmy I. Another good friend of Jimmy I is Joe Ferriola, Joe Nagel, Mr. Clean. He was boss of Chicago outfit as well, but like Turk, had some health issues and his life was cut way too short. I always felt sorry for his son, Nicky F., that he lost his dad at such a young age. But according to Nick Calabrese, whether you believe it or not, Ferriola was there at that house in Bensonville when the Splatro brothers were brutally beaten, stomped to death. Afterwards, they went to a diner, John Feccarata, Nick Calabrese, and Joe Nagel. And Joe Nagel told Nicky Calabrese and Feccarata to cut up their gloves into little pieces. This man here, not only was he good friends with Jimmy I, but he was one of Tony Accardo's favorites. Another good friend, very good friend of Jimmy I, and a friend of mine, you got Ralphino. Ralphino owns one of the best restaurants in the city, definitely one of the best on Taylor Street. You got Pompeii. Highly recommend going here. It's very reasonable priced. Delicious pasta, pizza, Italian sausage and peppers. They got it all. You could park and back for free. You'll definitely see some of the Taylor Street guys in here. This is a place Jimmy I used to like to hang out as well. And Ralphino used to tell me a lot of funny stories about what it was like growing up with Jimmy I back in the day. Another good friend of Jimmy I, you got Tony Spilotro. And sometimes I wonder, guys like Jimmy I and Joe Lombardo, Rocco Lombardo, friends of the Spilotro brothers, what they must have felt like, one, when the Spilotro brothers went missing, and two, when the Spilotro brothers were found, and then 3 years later, when we found exactly what happened to the Spilotros. The outfit had enough of Tony Spilotro and Michael Spilotro. They were originally going to kill them in Vegas. That didn't go too well, so they went to plan B. As we all know what happened. They were lured to a house in Bensonville and brutally beaten and stomped to death. Those bodies were supposed to never be found, and because of the botched burial by Al Taco, Thakarada, and others, all hell broke loose when these two bodies were found. Fast forward 2005, Nikki Calabrese testified in court exactly what happened and all the heavyweights that were personally there to kill the Spilotros. But Tony Spilotro was very good friends with Jimmy I. Another good friend of Jimmy I is Marvin Hagler here, bouncer. I remember the old Ditka's. Ditka had a high-end restaurant right there on, I think, Ontario. And when right next door, they had a pretty popular nightclub called City Lights. And the bouncer was none other than the boxer Hagler. I remember seeing him, not the brightest guy, not the sharpest guy, not the smartest guy, but he definitely had a couple teeth missing, jacked up nose, and you could just tell he was a bouncer. But as we all know, a lot of Chicago outfit guys were very, very, had a lot of influence in the boxing business. And guys like Johnny Lira, Joe Lombardo, Bobby Salerno, they were young boxers themselves. Another good friend. We can go on and on with friends of Jimmy I. You got Gianni Russo, the actor that was in the movie The Godfather. He played Carlo, and we'll never forget the brutal beating that Sonny Corleone gave him outside on Mulberry Street. But he was good friends with Jimmy I as well. I remember seeing him not too long ago at the Taylor Street Fest. Tanned, dressed to the nines. He actually had a booth where you could take pictures and buy merch for a small fee. I thought that was pretty interesting. I'm hoping that he'll be back this year at the Taylor Street Fest. But this guy, as we all know, has got some unbelievable stories, and he's kind of like a mob guy wannabe, if you will. Now here's another close friend of Jimmy Ice Pick. You got Greg Polian. This guy passed away of cancer, brain cancer, I believe, when he was on a couple months before his trial. But this guy here reported to Jimmy I. He was one of the biggest bookies in the city after most of the other guys got locked up. But this is Greg Polian. He passed away. There's a great photo of him and Peter DeFranzo on a yacht somewhere down in Florida fishing. Greg Polian, good friend of Jimmy I. A couple more friends. There's a nice photo. I'm not sure what restaurant they're at, but you got Greco, Chicago outfit associate. Legitimate guy, though, but he made a fortune in the import-export business, like a lot of Italian guys. And then you got Joey Lombardo's brother, Rocco Lombardo, Chicago outfit associate. And then in the middle, you got Jimmy I. You could see Jimmy I is starting to lose a lot of weight. But here's 3 Chicago outfit associates all having a nice dinner. Rocky made a fortune, as we all know, with some of his brother's legitimate businesses, the California Club, other investments, as well as some high-end strip clubs in Las Vegas and Chicago. But great photo here of these 3 gents. Another good friend here. I'd rather not say his name because I know this guy, but recent photo of Jimmy I. You can see Jimmy I kind of like some other wise guys like Sally D and DeFranzo. These guys like to get out there and wine and dine. They're not hiding in a cave or under a rock like Chin Gigante out of the Genovese family. But this is another great photo of Jimmy Ice Pick. And a very dear friend, another friend of mine, the late Mikey Switek. This guy here was one of the best burglars in the country back in his day. He was also a master in explosives. A legend in the Grand Avenue neighborhood. He ran the Survivor Club when Joey Lombardo was in prison. I was very fortunate to meet Mikey Switek at his brother's hardware store. I would go in there at least 2-3 times a week, and once a week they would all cook. I remember bumming smokes, listening to some of Mikey's stories, and having lunch with Mike Switek. Every other time he would go into the hardware store, he would always give Joe and some of the guys an update on Jimmy I's health. But God bless the late Mikey Switek. I remember when this photo was taken, he told the guy who took the photo, "You better not fucking put that on Facebook." I thought that was pretty funny. Funny story I had with Mikey Switek is one time I went in there, I was complaining about how expensive some of these honeybee hams were, and he snapped at me. He said, "Was it good?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Did you enjoy it with your family?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Did your family enjoy it?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, quit fucking complaining about the price." But I remember another time I bummed smokes off of Mikey. He would give me 1, 2, but after the second, third cigarette, he said, "Hey, you're not going to be sitting in here every day bumming smoke." I said, "Oh, don't worry, Mike. I'll buy you a pack." And he yelled at me, "Don't buy me a pack. Buy yourself a fucking pack." He screamed it at me. I never once bummed a cigarette from anybody ever again. But God bless Mikey Switek. You could tell this is definitely a serious guy, not a guy you want to mess around with, but one of Jimmy I's best friend. They don't make men like this anymore. These guys are the last Mohicans. Now here's a photo of Jimmy I. Looks like he's at a street festival. 2 times I've seen Jimmy I. One time at Bella Nota on Grand Avenue. I had no idea who it was until the host, Ramon, whispered to me on my way out that Jimmy I's inside. Then I realized who it was. Him, Gabit, and others would have legendary New Year's Eve and Super Bowl parties upstairs on the second floor apartment at Bella Nota. Fast forward, I seen him at the Melrose Park Fest. I'll never forget. Every 5-10 minutes, people were coming up to him, shaking his hand, hugging him, giving him kisses. I was a little intimidated to go anywhere near him. But this is Jimmy I. This gentleman lived to be 80 years old, a legend in the Chicago outfit. Now we got to talk about the elephant in the room. The day he died, a disgruntled FBI retired agent sent a memo in the top mob investigative reporter, Chuck Gowdy. Chuck Gowdy's been reporting on the mob 35 years now. I've seen him many times in court. I've made small talk with him. I'm not a big fan of Chuck Gowdy, and either are a lot of the outfit guys, just like John Cass. But the government in the media states that in the late 1960s, May 1969, up until May 1974, it's like 4 or 5 years, that Jimmy I was an informant. They gave the number 6931-C. And this was, I have to question the FBI's motive, the timing of releasing this. And it just shows no class. The guy passed away at 80 years old. And a disgruntled FBI agent sends this to Chuck Gowdy for him to post. Now, the vast majority of men and people that knew Jimmy I, they knew this was bullshit. And if it is true that he was an informant back then, I'm pretty sure he was only giving them information on cargo thefts from the trucking industry, hijacking, etc. Nothing about the Chicago outfit or their bosses. Because keep in mind, in the late 60s and early 70s, Chicago outfit was one of the most powerful organized crime families in the country. You had Tony Arcardo, Gus Alex, Jack Cerrone, Joey Upa. All these men were alive and active. So there's no way in hell Jimmy I was dry snitching or giving them up anything. But some people think that once he started cooperating in 1969, that he cooperated and gave them information till the day he died. I don't believe that. But I want to know, what do you guys think? Do you think Jimmy I was an informant? Do you think he just gave a little bit of tidbits to protect him and his friends and keep him out of jail? He never once got a reduction in his sentence. And keep in mind, he did 18 years in jail. So I question the government's motive and the timing of this. What do you guys think? Do you think Jimmy I was an informant? Also, when DeFranco died and his brother, nobody said anything at all or posted anything about him being an informant. There was whispers and rumors, but no documents like this. So why would they not do it for No Nose DeFranco and do it for Jimmy I? What do you guys think? I don't think he gave them anything. I think he's a stand-up guy doing 18 years in prison and maybe gave him a little bit of information, like I said, about all the hijacking going on back then. Now, here's a more recent photo of Jimmy I. You can see it looks different in every photo. There with his attorney walking through the Dirksen Federal building. And I know guys in the neighborhood they think I'm nuts for going to trials here. Some of them find it fascinating. But they say as soon as you walk into the lobby, your rights go right out the fucking window. But this is Jimmy I. Like John DeFranco, he no longer needed the illegal money from the rackets because he was making so much money with his currency exchanges, his trucking company, private investments, stock market, construction, real estate. What do you guys think? Do you think Jimmy I was an informant? I don't think so. Do you think John Nose DeFranco was an informant? I don't think so. I think they just outplayed their ops in the outfit and outsmarted some of the agents. Just gave them enough to keep them out of jail. But last but not least, I want to share something with you. Bear with me here. Let me share my screen.
Joint. If we don't see it tomorrow by 6 o'clock, you don't owe nobody nothing. You understand? You have it here by 6 o'clock tomorrow night. Well, believe me when I tell you, and I promise you this. Believe me, I promise you. I'll break every fucking bone in your body before I go to jail. Every fucking bone in your body. I swear to my kids. You understand? All right, okay. Bye-bye.
What do you think? Does that sound like a government informant to you? I don't think so. Can you imagine owing a guy like Jimmy I money? Another quote I remember Mikey Switek said, there was one guy, I'd rather not name his name. This guy they call him the Lone Ranger. This guy rode horses, owned horses, sold horses, eat shit and slept horses. He got behind with Jimmy I, and Jimmy I threatened him. He told the in-between guy, the conduit, he'll never ride a fucking horse again. But that's Jimmy I. The legacy of Jimmy I still lives on. Please, if you like my Chicago mob trial stories, hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. It's Saturday afternoon. I hope everybody has a safe and great rest of your weekend. Ciao.